The wind is screaming across the deck rail hard enough to knock a grown man off balance. 40-foot waves are hammering a hull. Somewhere out there, that same storm has already swallowed a fishing trawler whole, and you're standing at the railing of a ship weighing over 100,000 tons, watching the horizon disappear and reappear. And somehow, you are not afraid. How does a cruise ship this massive stay this calm in front of something that violent? Here's the assumption almost everyone carries onto that ship. Bigger means tougher. A 100,000-ton hull should shrug off a storm the way a tank shrugs off gravel. That exact assumption is what got over 1,500 people killed on a ship the world was told was unsinkable. Size was never what kept anyone alive. And once you understand what's actually happening beneath that hull during a storm, you realize just how thin the real margin is. So let's start with the obvious question. Why doesn't the ship just turn around the second a storm shows up? Because by the time you can see a storm, it's already too late to be reacting to it. Every major cruise line runs onboard meteorologists and satellite tracking that catch a hurricane forming 3 to 5 days out, while it's still a swirl of clouds on a screen 1,000 miles away. That window is everything. Skip a port, reverse the itinerary, delay departure. 6 hours. None of it looks dramatic from a deck chair. But on that bridge, officers are rerunning the numbers constantly because a storm 300 miles off course on Monday can close that gap by Wednesday. And closing that gap is exactly how ships end up trapped. We tend to picture weather routing as one decision, made once and filed away. It isn't. It's a fight, fought continuously, updated every few hours as wind speed shifts and pressure drops, and a storm that looked predictable suddenly turns toward the exact stretch of ocean the ship planned to cross. Officers don't relax once a route is set. They watch it the way a pilot watches fuel gauges on a long-haul flight. Constantly, because the moment they stop watching is the moment the numbers turn against them. But routing only saves you if you catch it early. So, what happens when a storm refuses to cooperate? Then the fight moves from the bridge into the hull itself, and it comes down to one number most passengers have never heard of: metacentric height. Picture two forces fighting each other nonstop. Gravity pulling the ship's weight toward one point, buoyancy pushing water up against another. When a wave slams the ship sideways and it tips, those 2 points pull apart, and the distance between them decides everything. Snap back upright or keep rolling toward the point of no return. Get that number wrong, even slightly, and a rough night turns into something else entirely. Get it right, and the ship corrects itself before the roll even finishes. So how do you protect that number on something built like a skyscraper lying on its side? You cheat gravity. Violently. Engines, generators, fuel tanks, every brutally heavy component gets buried as low in the hull as physically possible, often below the waterline itself. From the harbor, 13 decks of glass and steel stacked overhead make the ship look one gust away from tipping. Underneath the waterline, none of that matters. The weight that counts is already pinned to the bottom. Ballast tanks tighten the margin further, pumping tons of water between compartments in real time, adjusting the balance to whatever the sea is doing that hour. None of it is a guess either. Every ship carries a stability book, a set of exact calculations covering how the vessel behaves at every possible load. Add fuel, the numbers shift. Fill the pools, they shift again. Load 6,000 passengers unevenly during a storm, they shift once more. Naval architects work all of it out in advance, down to fractions of a degree, so there's always a mathematically guaranteed reserve of stability sitting untouched, waiting for the one night the sea actually comes to collect it. All right, the ship won't flip from bad weight distribution, but what about the violence of the roll itself? The part that actually terrifies people. That's a separate battle, fought with different weapons. active fin stabilizers, long blades extending from the hull like wings, twisting constantly to fight the roll before it builds. They don't calm the ocean. They cancel the ocean's effect on you specifically, milliseconds before you'd feel it. Some ships add gyroscopic stabilizers on top, massive wheels spinning inside sealed compartments, resisting any attempt to tilt them, the same brutal physics that keeps a spinning top from falling over. Together, these systems absorb rolls of 20 to 30 degrees, angles that would be genuinely terrifying to witness raw, and hand passengers nothing but a gentle sway. The storm is still out there, doing real violence to the water. The ship simply refuses to pass it along. Even the hull shape is fighting for you. The rounded underside isn't there for efficiency. It's there so the hull rolls with a wave instead of standing rigid against it, the way a boxer rolls with a punch instead of squaring up to eat it clean. A flat, stubborn hull fights every wave head-on. A curved one lets the wave burn out sliding past instead of slamming straight into the decks where you're standing. Even direction matters. Turn broadside to a big enough swell, and you're taking every hit across the widest, most exposed part of the hull. Point the bow into it, and the ship slices through wave after wave instead of getting rolled by them. That single decision, which way the bow is pointing, is worth more in a real storm than almost anything else on board. But here's a threat nobody expects because it isn't coming from outside the hull at all. It's coming from the water already on board. A half-empty pool, a half-full ballast tank, any large surface of water sloshing loose inside the ship doesn't just sit there quietly during a storm. It swings. Engineers call it the free surface effect, and it's brutal in practice. Loose water shifts hard to one side as the ship rolls, and instead of settling, it piles up and pushes the roll even further before crashing back the other way. Enough free-moving water in the wrong place can quietly eat away at the very stability the ballast tanks were supposed to protect. So, the moment real weather is forecast, crews drain the pools, not for safety theater. Because 3 feet of water thrown violently side to side, multiplied across a dozen tanks and pools throughout the ship, is its own kind of danger, one most passengers never even realize was neutralized before the first wave hit. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. None of this happens automatically. Every one of these systems depends on a human being deciding in real time exactly how close is too close. Officers watch stability numbers constantly, treating them as hard limits, not suggestions, because history has already shown what happens the moment someone decides those limits are negotiable. A captain who pushes past a stability warning to protect a schedule isn't being brave. He's making the exact mistake that has sunk ships before, the same instinct that told a Titanic captain his ship couldn't be beaten by ice. So the ship staying upright isn't really about the ship. It's about a bridge full of people whose entire job is refusing to let the vessel find out what it can actually survive. So what happens on the rare night when every layer fails, when a storm outruns the forecast and there's genuinely nowhere left to hide? Even then, the ship isn't gambling. International law requires passenger vessels to be sealed into watertight compartments, so flooding in one section can't spread and drag the whole hull under with it. It's the same basic principle that failed over a century ago, when a single gash below the waterline flooded compartment after compartment until nothing was left holding the ship up. Now the law demands something far stricter. A modern cruise ship has to stay afloat and stable, even with several compartments completely flooded at once, proven mathematically before it's ever allowed to carry a single paying passenger. When the Costa Concordia tore open on a rock reef in 2013, that principle was the difference between a fast catastrophe and a 6-hour evacuation with almost everyone surviving. Not comfortable, not painless, but survivable, because the compartments held long enough for people to get off. So does the size that makes the ship look so exposed actually help or hurt? It helps. And this is where the assumption flips one final time. Mass resists motion. A 100,000-ton vessel takes a violent amount of energy to rock, which is exactly why a swell that would fling a small fishing boat end over end barely registers as a shudder on a cruise ship's deck. Same wave, two different hulls, two completely different outcomes. What looks terrifying and top-heavy from the harbor wall is, out on open water, the exact thing working in your favor. The bigger the ship, the more violence it takes to move it, and the more time the bridge has to react before that violence becomes a genuine threat. Put every piece together, and this stops looking like brute survival. It starts looking like a controlled negotiation, fought days in advance with forecasts, then continued in real time with weight, spinning steel, drained pools, and tons of shifting water. Every layer built specifically so the layer underneath it never has to be tested. Which brings you back to that railing, wind screaming, waves hammering a hull you can't see the bottom of. You're not thinking about metacentric height or watertight compartments or a captain somewhere above you refusing to test the ship's limits tonight. That's exactly the point. The whole system exists, so the worst thing you experience is a delayed buffet and a slightly rerouted itinerary. Somewhere out there, the storm is still just as violent as it ever was. It simply never got the chance to prove it.